I'll get you pregnant in exchange for 10 million. But why do you have that ring? You're my first love. I'll get you pregnant in exchange for 10 million. Do I look like a pimp to you? Do you think you can give up your dignity for the one you love? How far are you willing to go to face the challenges ahead? Mariel's face was troubled as she spoke to her mother's doctor. She was at the hospital because her mother, who had a heart condition, had been rushed there. She had just found out that her mother needed surgery as soon as possible. I'm really sorry, my dear, but we need a down payment before we can operate on your mother, the doctor said. The doctor felt pity for Mariel, but there was nothing he could do to help the young woman. Is that so? Okay, doc. I'll do everything I can. I'll find the money no matter what. Please take care of my mother for now. I'll be back, Mariel said softly, even though she was struggling. Without waiting for the doctor to respond, she quickly left the hospital and walked around to think about what to do. A few moments passed, and suddenly tears streamed down Mariel's face. She had no other relatives left. Her mother was the only family she had left. What am I going to do now? Mariel whispered to herself as she wiped her tears. Miss! Mariel stopped walking when a car pulled up beside her. She looked at it and saw a very handsome man in the driver's seat, wearing a tuxedo. Is this a joke? Mariel thought to herself. The man looked at her seriously and suddenly said, I'll get you pregnant in exchange for 10 million. Do I look like a pimp to you? Mariel was shocked and couldn't believe what she had just heard. What did I do to deserve this? She thought. A virgin pimp? Is that even possible? She laughed at herself. You don't want to? I just need to hear a yes or no, the man said. Mariel was still in shock. Are you serious? She asked nervously, thinking the man might be joking. I'm Felix. 10 million in exchange for carrying my child. You'll have a place to stay, and I'll cover all your expenses while you're pregnant. Felix offered again. 10 million, Mariel whispered, thinking it over. That amount would be enough to cure her mother and start a small business for their future. All of that in exchange for her dignity and virginity. I have one condition, Mariel said, raising her head. If I get pregnant, you'll do everything to provide for all my needs and wants. Getting pregnant isn't easy, she added. Felix nodded after a few seconds. Before she knew it, Mariel was back at the hospital with Felix. She told him about her mother, and thanks to Felix, her mother was finally scheduled for surgery. Follow me, Miss Mariel, the nurse said. Mariel followed the nurse to a room in the hospital. The nurse had her sit on a hospital bed. What are you going to do to me? Mariel asked nervously. Didn't they explain it to you properly? The doctor will place Mr. Felix's sperm inside you to get you pregnant, the nurse replied. Mariel bit her lower lip. She thought something would happen between her and Felix, but it turned out to be a different process to get her pregnant. This was better, though, because at least she could rest assured that her virginity wouldn't be taken by a stranger or someone she didn't know. Besides, Felix seemed really wealthy since he immediately paid her mother's hospital bill. That's what amazed her the most. He didn't hesitate to help them. Doc, won't this hurt? Mariel asked as a female doctor entered the room with a sharp injection. You won't feel any pain. Just relax, the doctor said. Mariel calmed herself and thought positively about the 10 million. She could endure this for her and her mother's future. 2 weeks later, Mariel was pacing back and forth in the living room of a large mansion where Felix had her stay. There were 2 maids and a driver in the mansion. Mariel was holding a pregnancy test when the door opened, and Felix walked in. His hair was disheveled, and he looked exhausted, with his shoulders slumped and his eyes sleepy. It was late at night, but Mariel had been waiting for Felix to come home. What are you doing here? Felix asked. Mariel walked up to him and handed him the positive pregnancy test. Felix took it and immediately understood what the 2 red lines meant. You're pregnant? That's great news. Rest now and we'll go for a checkup first thing tomorrow, Felix said happily. He immediately escorted Mariel to her room. Mariel didn't protest and just followed him. She was excited about her pregnancy, but even more excited to give birth and start a new life with her mother. Mariel fell asleep, but a few hours later, she woke up because her stomach was growling. Why am I so hungry? I just ate dinner, she whispered to herself and quickly got up to go downstairs. She headed to the kitchen, which was on the second floor, so she had to go down the stairs. The mansion was dark, but the moonlight was bright enough for Mariel to see where she was going. As she was looking for something to eat, the kitchen lights suddenly turned on. "What are you doing?" Felix asked, startling Mariel. "I'm hungry," Mariel replied, grabbing some food. Felix frowned when he saw Mariel holding a cookie in one hand and mayonnaise in the other. She combined the two and seemed to enjoy it. "You could have woken the maids to prepare food for you," Felix said. Mariel shook her head. "No, it's fine. There are still cookies here." She grabbed a bowl, filled it with cookies, and added mayonnaise. She placed it on the table and sat down to eat. Felix shook his head. "Pregnancy cravings, I guess," he thought to himself. "Why are you still awake?" Mariel asked Felix, who was getting cold water from the refrigerator. "I can't sleep," Felix replied. "Well, let's talk then." "We don't know each other that well yet," Mariel said. "I already know you, Mariel. You're 25 years old, from the Visayas, and your only family is your mother, who's in the hospital. You're a college graduate," Felix said. Mariel cut him off. "Wait, are you stalking me? You seem to know everything about me, but I don't know anything about you, not even a small detail. I've done my research. I don't just pick anyone to carry my child. And why did you sign the contract if you didn't know me well?" Felix added. Mariel added more mayonnaise to her cookies. "Actually, I wouldn't have accepted your offer if I weren't desperate. What would you have done if I had refused?" "I would have forced you," Felix said. Mariel was puzzled by his answer. She actually felt comfortable with Felix, though she didn't know why. "Have we met before?" Mariel suddenly asked. "What do you think?" Felix replied, turning the question back to her. Mariel thought for a moment and stared at Felix's face, trying to remember if they had met before. "Hurry up and finish eating. Let's go upstairs," Felix added. "What's your life story? Where are your parents? Do you have a girlfriend or a fiancé?" Mariel asked in rapid succession. "I don't have parents, and I don't have a girlfriend or fiancé," Felix replied briefly. "You're so stingy with your answers," Mariel whispered. She carried the bowl that still had some food in it and walked back to her room. Felix followed her until they reached her room. "You know, you could just tell me where we met or if we've even met before," Mariel said, looking back at Felix. "Is that still important?" "Go to sleep," Felix said. Mariel didn't say anything else as Felix left her standing there. She sighed and entered her room. She just wanted to get to know Felix better, and that was all. The next day, "Congratulations, you're 2 weeks pregnant," the doctor said happily. Felix's face lit up at the good news. "Thank you so much, Doc," Felix said gratefully, while Mariel remained quiet. "Just make sure to give her everything she needs with proper discipline. Even though the baby is holding on tightly, pregnancy is still not easy, so take good care of her," the doctor reminded. "You can count on me, Doc," Felix assured, then looked at Mariel, who was looking around the clinic. After the checkup, they left the clinic. "I just need to stop by the office for a bit. Then we'll go home," Felix said while driving. "Sure. Take your time," Mariel replied, looking out the car window. They soon arrived at Felix's company. Mariel, who had been feeling down earlier, was amazed at how big the company Felix owned was. "You can wait here. I'll just be a moment," Felix said. "Can I come with you?" Mariel quickly asked. Felix saw the excitement on her face and nodded, thinking she might get bored if he left her in the car. As they entered the building, they were immediately greeted by the company's security guard. Mariel was happy to see the friendly employees who greeted her and Felix. "What are you going to do here? Your company is really big," Mariel said as she followed Felix walking until they entered the elevator. "I just need to sign some papers in my office. Do you want me to give you a tour of the whole building?" Felix asked. "Maybe later. I just wanted to say that you don't have to rush. Is there any food here?" "I'm hungry," Mariel said. Felix nodded in response to her question. He pulled out his phone from his pocket and called his secretary to bring food to his office within 5 minutes. "Do you have any specific food you want?" Felix asked while still on the phone. Something with cheese, please, Mariel said with a smile. Felix immediately instructed his secretary and ended the call. They quietly exited the elevator on the 9th floor and walked to Felix's office. Mariel remained amazed as she entered Felix's private office, which was very spacious. The architecture was simple, and she also saw some art galleries and vases around. Felix went to his office desk, while Mariel wandered around the office. About half an hour later, Felix finished signing the necessary papers, and Mariel was also eating the food that Felix's secretary had brought. I'll just clean up the mess. Let's go home, Felix said. You're done already? That was fast, Mariel said, standing up. Felix didn't say anything else until they got home to the mansion. Mariel didn't know why Felix seemed out of sorts, but she didn't ask because she might irritate him. Days and weeks passed. Mariel was content and comfortable living in the mansion since she and Felix found out she was pregnant. She didn't see or talk to Felix much because he was very busy with the company. Her belly was growing, and she hadn't told her mother that she was already 5 months pregnant. She didn't want to stress or worry her mother about the decision she had made. She just told her mother that she had a job and that they wouldn't see each other for a few months. She sent her mother back to the province and stayed in the city. One day, Felix, Mariel called out one day, shaking Felix, who was lying next to her in the mansion. They had pillows between them. Mariel wanted to sleep next to Felix because she kept waking up in the middle of the night to eat. Felix was also being bothered by her cravings, but he didn't complain. Because of this, they often slept in the same room, which brought them closer. Felix didn't know how to control himself because he was still a man. There were times when he found Mariel attractive, but he restrained himself, especially since he respected Mariel. What? Felix whispered, clearly still sleepy. I need to pee, Mariel said. Felix frowned. Then go pee. The bathroom is right there. What time is it, Mariel? You're not going to leave the room to pee, are you? Why are you like this? I asked you to sleep next to me so you could help me when I need it, right? So come on, watch me outside the door, Mariel said. Felix reluctantly accompanied Mariel to the bathroom. Don't leave, Mariel said seriously as she entered the bathroom. Felix sighed and closed his eyes because he was so sleepy. It would have been better to work at the office than to take care of a pregnant woman, he thought. Are you still there? Mariel asked. I'm here. I can't hear you. Are you back in bed already? Mariel said. I'm here right outside, Felix replied. Felix rubbed his forehead because of what was happening. Even so, he knew in his heart that he didn't regret his decision. The bathroom door opened, and Felix stood up abruptly. Are you done? He asked. Mariel shook her head. No, I couldn't pee. My stomach hurts. Felix calmed himself and tried to be patient. He needed to be patient because he knew this was all happening because of Mariel's pregnancy. The next morning, after a happy morning greeting, Mariel was busy preparing a lunchbox in their kitchen with Yaya Belen, who had a happy smile on her face and was ready to help with anything needed. They were in the kitchen, focused on preparing the ingredients for Felix's lunch. They were making sandwiches and putting them in a lunch container, along with some vegetables and fruit slices for dessert. Mariel, Sir Felix is really lucky to have such delicious meals, Yaya Belen said. Oh, Yaya Belen, it's not like that. We're just happy to be together and support each other, Mariel replied. Really? I hope you and Sir Felix end up together. Ever since you moved in here, it's like his life has gained color. He's not the same serious and grumpy Sir Felix anymore. Since then, he's become more caring and kind, Yaya Belen said. Mariel paused for a moment and smiled at Yaya Belen. You know our situation, Yaya Belen, right? But Ma'am Mariel, I can feel that Sir Felix's care for you comes from the heart. He used to have a short temper, but now he's always patient. He used to always look sad, but whenever he's with you, I don't see that sadness in his eyes anymore. His care really comes from the heart. Of course, it's because of the child you're carrying, right? It's his child too. Don't you feel sorry for the child? You could build a happy family. Who knows? Mariel fell silent. Their agreement was only about the contract and she had signed it. She felt sad whenever she thought about it because as the days and months passed, she was growing more attached to the child in her womb. Even though the baby hadn't been born yet, there was no turning back, especially since she had already spent the money on her mother. She had chosen this decision, so whether it hurt or not, it seemed like there was nothing she could do. "Oh, Yaya Belen, let's focus on this first," Mariel said, not asking any more questions. Yaya Belen didn't say anything else as she put the food in the lunchbox. Mariel noticed the high quality of the lunchbox, surrounded by love. She chose to personally make it for Felix. She often wondered if she was feeling love for Felix because of the child in her womb. That's it. That's all it is, Mariel reminded herself. She thanked Yaya Belen for helping her today. Now she was outside Felix's company. She took a deep breath before entering the building. She was immediately let in by the security guard, who recognized her. She was carrying the lunchbox in her left hand while holding her stomach with her right hand. "Ma'am, let me help you with that." A guard suddenly appeared and took the lunchbox. "Congratulations, ma'am. We didn't expect Sir Felix to have a child already." "Thank you, Kuya. Is Felix busy?" "I forgot to tell him I was coming," Mariel said. "He's busy, ma'am, but I'm sure he'll make time for you," the guard said. Mariel didn't say anything else and just shook her head at her thoughts. Felix would definitely make time for her. They soon reached the floor where Felix's office was. As she approached the door and opened it, she didn't expect to see a scene that would hurt her heart. At Felix's office desk, she saw Felix talking to a beautiful and sexy woman. They both had sweet smiles on their faces as they chatted. Mariel felt the first spark of fear and anxiety, but she gave herself a chance to interrupt with confidence and trust. "Hi, Felix. I brought some food for your lunch," Mariel said with a fake smile, despite what she was feeling. Felix was surprised but quickly stood up and approached Mariel. "What are you doing here? Why didn't you call? It's hot outside and you traveled all the way here. What if something happened to you?" Felix said with concern. Mariel noticed that Felix was worried about her, but she also noticed that he was worried about the child she was carrying. Felix noticed that Mariel was looking at the woman he was talking to. "Ah, Mariel, let me introduce you. This is Miss Martinez. She's my new secretary here at the office." Felix introduced the woman he was talking to. "Oh, I see. Hi, Miss Martinez. I'm Mariel." Mariel introduced herself and walked closer to the woman. She extended her hand for a handshake. Miss Martinez smiled and extended her hand for the handshake as well. Mariel looked back at Felix. "I just brought the lunchbox. I'll go home now," she said seriously. Without waiting for Felix to respond, she quickly walked out the door because she was already confused about the pain she was feeling in her heart. On the other hand, the guard left the lunchbox in Felix's office. "Escort her to my driver. Make sure she gets home safely," Felix instructed the guard. "Sir, I think your wife might have misinterpreted us," Miss Martinez said. "Don't worry, I'll take care of her," Felix replied. In a quiet room, Mariel was standing in front of a large mirror, cleaning her face and fixing her hair while looking at herself in the mirror. At 7 months pregnant, many things had changed in her body and emotions. "Mariel, look at you. You're 7 months pregnant. So much has changed, but that's just how it is." Mariel started talking to herself. "You're beautiful. You're creating a life inside you. But sometimes you can't help but wonder if Felix will still like you now that you have stretch marks and less energy. Why am I even thinking about that? After I give birth, we'll go our separate ways. He'll be happy with someone else, not me. It's so hard to be pregnant. I thought it would be easy, even with 10 million in exchange, but it's still not enough for the sadness I feel about leaving the baby someday." She placed her hands on her stomach. "But do you feel it, Mariel? Felix's excitement whenever he touches your stomach? His smiles full of love? Do you notice the simple things he does for you and the baby?" Mariel looked at herself in the mirror again. "Felix's care for you won't disappear just because of these changes. He said he appreciates how much I'm enduring now." Mariel sighed at what was happening. She touched her face and felt that it was wet. "Why am I crying? I'm becoming a loser. I used to be so strong." Is this really the effect of pregnancy? Mariel said, trying to calm herself and wipe the tears from her face. No matter what happens, I'll endure it so I can safely deliver our child and make sure everything turns out well, Mariel said positively to herself. Even though it was sad, Mariel was still happy because she knew the child would have a happy and beautiful life under Felix's care. At the food court, Felix, Mariel, and Yaya Belen were at the food court, walking towards a table. Yaya Belen was carrying food for the pregnant Mariel. Mariel was already in her third trimester and was feeling both excitement and nervousness as the day of her delivery approached. Felix, the baby's kicks are so strong, Mariel said with a laugh. Felix nodded while holding Mariel's stomach. He must be really excited to meet us. Do you think he'll give me a chance to get to know him? Mariel asked in her mind as they sat down at the table. Yaya Belen opened the lunchbox, revealing the delicious home-cooked meals she had prepared. Ma'am, sir, here's the food, Yaya Belen said. They both thanked Yaya Belen. Felix, I'm already in my third trimester. I can't even reach my shoes anymore, Mariel said. Why are you always worrying about that? I'm always here to help you, Felix said. Mariel smiled, savoring the care Felix was showing her because she knew that at any moment it could disappear. She placed her hand on her stomach. And you, baby, we're so excited to meet you. I know you'll be a beautiful child, just like me, Mariel said. They hadn't allowed the doctor to reveal the baby's gender because they wanted to wait until the baby was born to make it more exciting. But for them, whatever gender the baby was, they would love it. As they ate, their conversation deepened. They talked about their plans for the baby's arrival, the things they needed to prepare, and the names they had thought of. Mariel felt sad because Felix hadn't mentioned the contract anymore. She had been praying that Felix would change his mind and let her stay with their child. But it seemed impossible. In the middle of their meal, Mariel noticed the happy people around them. She saw people smiling as they watched them. It was a beautiful day filled with joy and care. Sir Felix, have you ever thought about building a complete and happy family? Yaya Belen suddenly asked. They waited for Felix to answer. Mariel also wanted to know what he would say. I'll think about it, Belen, Felix said. Mariel's shoulders slumped at Felix's answer. She thought Felix had plans to build a family and that his perspective had changed. But it seemed she was wrong. On a quiet afternoon, Mariel was sitting in her favorite chair in the living room of their mansion, quietly reading a book as if she was enjoying the pages. But suddenly, she felt her stomach tighten, followed by intense pain. Oh no, Mariel whispered to herself as she held her stomach. The pain was so severe, and she felt her heart racing. Yaya Belen was on the other side of the living room and quickly approached Mariel. Ma'am, are you okay? Yaya Belen asked with concern. Mariel was full of anxiety, holding her stomach. Yaya, something's wrong. My stomach hurts so much. Without hesitation, Yaya Belen immediately called Felix, who was also in the mansion. As Yaya Belen hurriedly made the call, Felix quickly went to the living room. Mariel, what's happening? Felix asked with worry in his eyes as the pain flared up again. Felix, I can't take it anymore. It's getting worse, Mariel said. Without hesitation, Felix made a decision. Call the hospital, Yaya Belen. Prepare everything we need. We're taking Mariel to the hospital. It looks like she's going into labor. After a few minutes, Felix called their driver, and they quickly took Mariel out of the mansion and into the car. On the way, Mariel couldn't stop breathing heavily with each wave of pain. She held on to Felix's arm tightly until they reached the hospital. At the hospital, Mariel was immediately attended to by the medical staff. She was soon taken to the labor and delivery room, accompanied by Felix and Yaya Belen, who were ready to support her no matter what happened. As Yaya Belen and Felix watched over Mariel, she felt her contractions and the slowing of her heart. She jolted in her bed from the intensity of what she was feeling. Stay with us, Mariel, Felix said, holding her hand. Yaya Belen was worried and gently approached Mariel. Ma'am, you need to breathe. Despite her pain, Mariel forced herself to focus on the voices of the people around her as she waited for the medical staff to assist. Gradually, She felt the movements in her stomach, the signs of her baby's arrival. Yaya Belen called the nurse and doctor because the baby was about to come out. At the door of the delivery room, Felix was waiting with anxiety in his eyes. He stood there, holding his phone and constantly checking the time. The long wait seemed endless for him. He was annoyed at himself for being afraid of blood. Otherwise, he would have been by Mariel's side. Mariel had also requested that they not enter the room because she didn't want them to see her in pain. Even though Felix couldn't see her, he knew Mariel was suffering. From the very beginning, Yaya Belen had been by Felix's side, never leaving him to provide support. Yaya Belen noticed Felix's anxiety and slowly approached him. "Sir Felix, don't worry. I know Ma'am Mariel will be okay soon," Yaya Belen said with confidence in her eyes. Felix looked up and smiled at Yaya Belen. "Thank you, Yaya. I hope everything turns out well for Mariel and the baby. You know, sir, Ma'am Mariel is very strong-willed to carry your child. Don't worry, everything will be fine," Yaya Belen said, showing a positive outlook. Felix held Yaya Belen's shoulder and thanked her. Yaya Belen smiled. She had been Felix's nanny since he was a child. Meanwhile, inside the delivery room, the doctors and nurses were managing the entire process, working quickly and efficiently. The tension and anxiety were palpable among everyone inside, but there was also a strange sense of hope and love burning in each of them. Mariel was lying on the bed, talking to and calming a nurse as she waited for the moment of her baby's arrival. Her face was full of determination and deep gratitude that she had reached this point. With each touch of her hand on her stomach, she felt the contractions of her body. Beside her was Nurse Natalie, holding her hand and continuously providing support. It was as if they had become one with each breath and desire for everything to go well. "If only my mother were here," Mariel thought. She would have gotten through this quickly, but she needed high patience and determination to overcome the pain she was feeling. As the hours passed, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The doctors and nurses gathered around her bed, offering guidance and support. They immediately took her hands and offered encouraging words. "It's almost time, Ma'am Mariel. Just hold on," a nurse said as they assisted her. A smile formed on Mariel's face, even though she was still full of anxiety. "Thank you all," she said. The process of childbirth continued as Mariel felt the contractions and pushing of her body. Along with it were the efforts of the doctors and nurses to ensure everything was safe and smooth. After a few minutes, the room erupted in joy as Mariel successfully delivered a healthy baby boy. The baby's first cry strengthened everyone's hearts and gave them courage. The baby was handed to Mariel, who held him in her arms. She cried tears of joy and gratitude as she looked at the soft face of her child. "Welcome to the world, baby," Mariel whispered as she gently touched her baby's face. Felix stood up from his seat as the delivery room door opened, and he was allowed inside. He quickly approached Mariel's bed and looked at the baby in her arms. Felix couldn't help but cry tears of joy and love for their child. "He's so beautiful," Felix whispered. The voices of the doctors and nurses around them offered their congratulations. "Congratulations to the both of you. Your baby boy is very healthy." Mariel was overjoyed as tears streamed down her face when she saw the baby she had carried for 9 months. All the pain she had experienced seemed to disappear, and she didn't want to let go of the baby, especially now that he was finally in the world. After a long period of endurance and pain, their baby boy was born very healthy. Mariel needed to stay in the hospital to recover and rest from childbirth. In her room, Mariel was lying on her bed with the necessary medical equipment beside her. Felix was there, caring and ready to attend to her and their baby. "How are you? Do you need anything?" Felix asked with concern. Mariel gave Felix a gentle smile. "I'm okay, Felix. I'm a bit weak, but I'll get better." Felix looked at their baby boy, who was sleeping in the crib near the bed. "There's our baby, sleeping soundly." Mariel nodded, full of love in her eyes. "Thank you for taking care of him, Felix. I know you'll be a good and caring father." Mariel held back her tears because now that she had given birth, she was sure she would be separated from the baby she had carried for 9 months. She thought it would be easy to let go, but every time she looked at the baby, her chest tightened whenever she remembered that they would be separated for life. I'm so happy you safely delivered our child. Who do you think he looks like? Felix asked as he looked at the sleeping baby. Mariel was about to speak when Felix's phone rang. Felix answered it and hung up shortly after. I need to go to the office. My secretary called. I'll be back soon. Yaya Belen will take care of whatever you need here, Felix said. Before Mariel could say anything, Felix kissed her forehead and left the room. Mariel couldn't move for a moment and slowly touched her forehead. What does that mean? Mariel asked herself. She looked at Yaya Belen, who was sleeping soundly on a sofa. Mariel wiped the sudden tears from her eyes. I'm sorry, Yaya Belen. I'm sorry, Felix. I can't bear to be separated from my child. Her body was fine and she could move now. They could leave the hospital, but Mariel wanted to stay because she was looking for the right moment to escape with the baby, leave everything behind, and forget about the contract and the money. Her child was more important than the money. She could earn money, but the child she had given birth to today, if she left and was separated from him, she might never see him again for the rest of her life. She woke up to the reality that her child wasn't a toy to be exchanged for money. She had endured and taken care of herself for the sake of the baby, so she wouldn't let him be taken away from her. She would earn the 10 million again and return it to Felix no matter what. It was late at night, but Mariel's eyes were full of determination. In her heart, she had decided to do something she knew was wrong but necessary for herself and her child. She got up from the bed, not wasting any time, and carefully moved so as not to wake Yaya Belen. Mariel took off her hospital gown, revealing the shirt and pajamas she was wearing underneath. She was already dressed. She grabbed her sling bag, which was hidden under the pillow and contained money. She needed to succeed in this. She walked slowly this time, holding her baby boy in her arms. She held her child as if she still couldn't believe what she was doing. With each step, her emotions were strong and conflicting. When she reached the door of the room, she didn't know how to proceed. She focused on the signs that would lead her out of the hospital. In her mind, the goal was unclear but full of determination. She didn't show any signs of what she was doing, and she didn't see any nurses or patients in the hallway until she finally found the exit of the hospital. As she slowly walked out of the hospital, it was as if the stars were watching her steps. She realized that this wasn't easy, but she didn't hesitate to continue what she was doing until she finally stepped out of the hospital door, which led her into the vastness of the night. Mariel hailed a taxi and got in. To the province, please. I'll pay double, Mariel said to the driver. The driver didn't argue and drove off. On a bright morning, the colorful flowers and wide fields of the province greeted Mariel as she arrived at her small provincial home with her baby boy. She carried the experiences of the past days, and the worries in her heart were replaced with a new hope that she could start over. On the veranda of the house, her mother, Mama Linda, stood with joy and excitement in her eyes. Mariel, my child, come in. Why didn't you tell me you were coming home? Mama Linda said as she approached Mariel. Mariel smiled sweetly. Good morning, Mama. I missed you, Mariel said with love in her voice. Mama Linda lifted Mariel's face and looked at her with concern. How are you, my child? And wait, who's with you? Mariel showed her baby boy, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. This is my baby boy, Mama. My son. Mama Linda was shocked and overjoyed. My child, this is your son? He's so handsome. What's his name? Mariel smiled, full of love in her eyes. Caleb. His name is Caleb. Mama Linda was still in shock. Mariel, my child, where's his father? Why are you alone? Mariel didn't answer immediately, but after taking a deep breath, she found the courage to speak. There's no father, Mama. I'm sorry. Mama Linda's eyes were filled with both joy and worry. My child, I know you have your reasons, but I just want to remind you that we're here for you. Whoever Caleb's father is, I hope he knows what you're doing now. Mariel held back her tears and told her mother everything that had happened because she knew her mother would worry deeply. Mama Linda held Mariel's hand with love in her eyes. My child, I love you so much. Don't worry. I'll support you in whatever you want to do, Mama Linda said. Tears streamed down Mariel's face, mixed with emotions. Thank you, Mama. I'm so lucky to have you always by my side. Mama Linda nodded. You're always welcome, my child. In a bedroom of the small provincial house, Mariel was with her baby boy, Caleb, watching him sleep in his crib with love in her eyes. But on the other hand, Mariel couldn't hide the worry that enveloped her heart. Her mind was quietly struggling with an event she didn't want to happen but had to. Leaving Felix was something she really didn't want to do, and she knew that even if she explained it thoroughly to Felix, it wouldn't matter. Felix's gain was still greater than hers. I'm sorry, my child. I can't bear to be separated from you. You'll understand someday, Mariel whispered as she touched her baby's face, easing her worries. But behind her smiles, there was bitterness trying to take over. Mariel endured staying strong for her child, but she also couldn't deny the pain of leaving Felix. She left the room and looked for her mother. When she got her attention, she approached her and took something to look at. Do you remember the person who gave you this? A very beautiful promise ring. It's funny to think. Wasn't it the young man who wanted to marry you? Mama Linda suddenly said, coming out of the kitchen. Mariel frowned. Slowly, images began to form in her mind. 9 years ago, this was what happened. One afternoon, while Mariel was quietly sweeping the yard of their home, she suddenly noticed the noise of some troublemakers causing a commotion at the corner of the street. She quickly looked in the direction of the noise and saw the chaos. There was a man trying to stop the troublemakers from taking his wallet. In his efforts to escape, one of them managed to take Felix's wallet. Hey, come back here! The young man shouted as he continued to chase the troublemaker to hold him accountable for his theft. But one of them returned with his companions, making the situation even more chaotic, and it seemed like it wouldn't end well for the young man. In her heart, Mariel was immediately filled with worry and fear. She shuddered at what she saw. She quickly dropped the broom and ran towards the commotion. When she reached the scene, Mariel didn't back down from the danger. She tried to get the troublemakers' attention, pretending to scare them. What's going on here? Stop it. I'll call the barangay, Mariel shouted with intensity in her eyes. The troublemakers were startled by Mariel's sudden appearance and decided to leave, afraid that the situation might escalate if it reached the barangay. Are you okay? Mariel asked as she walked closer to the young man. The young man looked at Mariel with a questioning look in his eyes. Yes, thank you. It's just that I think I'm stuck. Mariel looked at the young man's face and saw the bruises on his cheeks. They're so mean, Mariel whispered, filled with anger towards the troublemakers. The young man laughed. It's okay. Thank you again. The young man was about to leave when Mariel suddenly grabbed his hand and pulled him towards their house. The young man didn't protest and just followed Mariel. I'll treat you. You might get an infection, Mariel said and let the young man into their house. Oh, my child. Who's this? Mama Linda asked, coming out of the kitchen of their small house. He was bullied by the troublemakers in front of the house, Mama. I'll just treat him quickly before he leaves, Mariel said. Is that so? Okay, hurry up. Let him eat lunch with us, Mama Linda said. Suddenly, the young man spoke. Can I marry your daughter? Mama Linda coughed at the sudden statement of the young man. Even Mariel almost fell off the plastic chair she was sitting on because of what the young man said. Well, you shouldn't be asking me, young man. You're so handsome and seem rich. If your intentions towards my daughter are true, I won't stop you. Or should I prepare the food? Wait, what's your name again? Mama Linda said. The young man smiled. Felix. Felix Sandoval. I'll marry your daughter when we meet again, he added. Who are you kidding? You don't even know me, Mariel said, laughing. Felix took something out of his pocket and placed it in Mariel's hand. It was a promise ring with diamond designs, real diamonds. I'll marry you whether you like it or not, Felix said. Mariel couldn't believe it. She had forgotten about the man who gave her the amazing encounter. The man she thought was joking and would never see again. It was Felix. Mama, do you remember the man who gave me this? The one who wanted to marry me? Mariel asked. Of course, my child. It was Felix, Mama Linda said. Mariel cried. She had made a mistake. She shouldn't have run away. She shouldn't have taken their child away because it wasn't a coincidence that they met. They had already met and known each other long ago. Mama, I made a mistake. I did something wrong that I'll regret, Mariel cried. I know, my child. I know. And no matter what, your decision was something any mother who values their child would make, Mama Linda said with a smile. She wiped the tears from Mariel's eyes. What do you mean, you know? Mariel asked, puzzled. Mama Linda looked outside the window of their small house. It was already afternoon, but it was still far from evening. Mariel's eyes widened when she saw Felix approaching their house through the window. My child, I couldn't help but know everything that's happening to you while I'm not by your side. Felix himself came to me to give me updates on your condition every week in the city, Mama Linda said. Mariel cried at what she had just learned. Mariel! She heard Felix's voice from the door of the house. Mariel quickly wiped the tears from her eyes. You're here, Mariel said and looked at Felix, who seemed shy. Felix complied and approached her with a smile on his lips. Yes, I'm here for you, for both of you. I was worried about you too. Mariel turned away, unable to look Felix in the eye. I'm sorry if I worried you about our child. Felix touched her arm, conveying a strange feeling of emotion. Mariel, I don't want to scare you. I know you love Caleb and are willing to do anything for him. So am I, and I have no intention of taking him away from you. I know you're afraid of being separated from Caleb, but you don't have to face these challenges alone. I want to be a part of Caleb's life and your life, Felix said, full of hope in his voice. Mariel couldn't hold back her tears. Her emotions were overwhelming. I'm sorry, Felix. I don't know how to face everything that's happening, Mariel said. Felix approached Mariel and faced her. He held her hands and stopped the tears in her eyes. Did you really forget me? It's only been 9 years, Felix said. Mariel shook her head. You were just joking back then, so I dismissed what happened. I didn't expect us to meet again. And in this situation, I remembered everything. And you seemed so crazy, suddenly appearing in front of me and saying you'd get me pregnant, Mariel said. You don't need to worry about what happened. Everything was planned from the moment you helped me with the troublemakers. Now, there's no turning back, Mariel. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. It might sound corny to others, but you're my love at first sight. I'll marry you whether you like it or not, Felix added, making Mariel laugh and quickly hug Felix. It felt like she was dreaming, and if it was a dream, she didn't want to wake up. One morning, Mariel got into her car, full of comfort in her heart. Every step seemed to strengthen her resolve as she arrived at Felix's company building. She was nervous for no apparent reason. She took a deep breath and sighed slightly as she headed to Felix's office. She frowned when she didn't see any other employees except for the security guard. Mariel entered Felix's office and was greeted by a crowd of people. Hello, Ma'am Mariel. Felix's secretary greeted her happily and excitedly. Mariel couldn't speak immediately. She noticed that the entire office was in chaos, and she saw people writing signages and various decorations full of colors. Is it okay if I design your wedding gown or other dresses? The secretary asked. Mariel frowned at the strange question. The secretary pointed behind her, so she turned around. She saw Felix holding a small box with a ring inside. Their promise ring. Mariel swallowed hard, and her cheeks flushed. What kind of joke is this? Mariel whispered, full of nervousness in her voice. Felix sat in front of her and handed her the ring. Mariel, I want us to be a complete family. I want us to have a promise that's stronger than what we feel now. I want us to build a big family together. Mariel sat down with tears in her eyes at the question that came from Felix's lips. Mariel, will you please marry me? At that moment, it felt like the world stopped as she saw everyone around her, including her child in Yaya Bellin's arms and her mother, full of smiles. I thought you'd never ask me again, Mariel said, crying and laughing at the same time. Tears continued to stream down her face, but they were mixed with happiness and hope. Yes, Felix, I'll marry you. Yes, Mariel stood up Felix and put on the ring, which fit perfectly and seemed customized for Mariel. The employees cheered in joy, clapping as the office filled with noise. Felix held Mariel's face and kissed her on the lips. Mariel kissed him back, which made the people in the office even more excited. A new chapter of life opened for Mariel, and this time, it wasn't just about her. It was about their future family. Mariel never gave up her dignity. Felix never let Mariel lose her dignity in his plan. That's how much he loved her. Mariel was ready to overcome all challenges, especially now that she knew she wasn't alone. Being a mother was very hard, but it wouldn't be difficult if there were people who supported and loved a mother. All challenges could be overcome if one wanted to overcome them. It needed prayer, but more importantly, it needed self-confidence and determination to move forward and not backward. 3 months later, after a quick preparation, they finally got married because what else were they waiting for? They already had Caleb and they were so happy. After that, they faced challenges, but love remained the center of their relationship, along with God, because that's what they promised at the altar when they got married. They stood by it because in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, they were together. And here ends the love story of Felix and Mariel. Thank you very much to everyone who tirelessly followed their journey, and a shout out to the following: Liberta Manarog, Angelina Mahler, Nesbeth Hanan, Gloria Escobar, Ligaya Carilo, Lee Bacchus, Boy Buko Vlogs, and more.